Yeah, thanks again for joining us. Wanting always to say and thank First Source Bank for sponsoring the gallery talks, and so thanks to them for this. Next month, before I forget, we are going to be at Ruthmere on November 3rd, Wednesday, November 3rd at 11 o'clock, and Carolyn Bonanno is going to be talking about the daughters of Queen Victoria and their influence upon fashion and politics. So there you go. But we are here today to talk about new acquisition, Rope Ferry painting, and how we acquired it, a little bit of history about rope ferries, a lot more information about the conservation of the painting from our curator, Jennifer Johns. But I'm going to lead us off with just a very brief review, and it's not rocket science. How did rope ferries come to be? I mean, it's a very practical solution, okay, for a common problem. If you're on two different sides of a river that has a current, and your goal is to get across the river safely, and you have business and commerce on those two sides, you either need to build a bridge, which is very expensive, time-consuming, and takes a lot of effort from a lot of people, or a much simpler solution, and maybe not quite as convenient, is to tie anchored lines to both sides, have the boat moored with either a rope, a chain, some type of mechanical device, and be able to pull back and forth. And I guess the one drawback is a bridge, you don't need somebody to operate it unless it's a drawbridge that you need to raise so that large ships can pass underneath. But a rope ferry, you need somebody pretty much to operate it, unless you're going to turn the keys over, as it were, to letting somebody try to do that themselves. So it's one of these things that's sort of lost to antiquity. We don't know when the first rope ferry operation ever was started, but we can document that in the early 1300s, so that would be the 14th century, there were places in England that were operating these types of ferry crossings for a toll that they were charging for. And because when you think about it, that's also the era of when there was tolls for pikes and roads, so you charge a toll to cross a river too. Same type of thing. So that's sort of the nutshell history of rope ferries. Now, how we came to acquire this painting is another different story entirely. In fact, I'm glad that Deb could be here to kind of help share the experience with us, and Bill was not available, but Bill Walter acquired this painting when he got the house. That's the story he shared with me.
I don't know the exact details, but I know he was very proud of that painting.
Yes, yeah. He told me, in fact, that here's my story. This is much I at least know from my own experience. I don't want to assume too much, but shortly after I became director, Bill Walter, the former owner of 819 North Main, had me come over just to get to know him as the neighbor to the north, and we were just chatting about different things, and he said, I got some stuff in here I want you to see. You like history. And one of the things that stuck out in my mind, I'll never forget, is where he had this painting hanging in his home, and he was very proud of it indeed. And at that moment in time, I was almost in love with the painting as much as he was, I think. I said to him, Mr. Walter, if you ever consider parting with this painting, please talk to me before you let it leave your hands, because you know how important the rope ferry was to the history of Elkhart and Havilah Beardsley. It's essentially the first business operation from a local American settler here. Of course, there was fur trades and things going on like that before, but it's absolutely pivotal point of interpretation. And rope ferry paintings aren't just out there. that is a very rare thing. And so he kind of gave me a friendly little nod, well, it's not for sale, but I thought, okay, that's fine, just if you ever do. So, you know, as fate dealt a rather cruel hand in the summer of 2020 with the fire at 819, and as our discussions progressed on what would happen with that property, the rope ferry painting became part of closing the deal, I guess, is maybe one way to say it. I was very hopeful, because it had been damaged in the fire, you're about to see. And it was gonna require significant conservation to bring it back and to save it, like saving the house as well. And it was that important that I really wanted to see if it could come into Ruthmere's possession so that we could interpret it for the good of the community. So with that, we were able to make a very friendly, pleasant agreement. And we acquired the rope ferry, and it went to our curator, Jennifer Johns, who is going to tell the next part of the story with what we did with the rope ferry painting. So, over to you. Oh, I turned off?
No, I don't think this one's.
Oh, okay.
Charged.
I got you. Here you go.
You have to wear the jacket.
Nice jacket.
Yeah.
I think. One of my favorites.
Okay, this one's set up different than the one I just took off.
It's for men.
Yeah, so, look on the other side, this one. Okay. So, I'm not an art conservationist, so she put down everything that, they did to the process, so I'll kind of just summarize it, because it's interesting. I mean, there's a lot of work to go into restoring anything. So Monica Raidecki at Raidecki Studios in South Bend is the one that we took the painting to. She's done projects for other museums I've worked at. She's done big murals for Notre Dame, does excellent work, so we knew it would be in good hands. Okay, so this is before. It's kind of hard, even if I turn off the light, you really can't.
Well, let's kill that front light though, I think. Yeah, that's helpful.
Yeah. All right. So this is it minus the frame. So the process that she went through, of course, take it out of the frame. But they did local treatment to lifting the paint and heat blistering, proceeded with it's called Viva 8D8, which is like it's some stuff. I don't know. Lift it all up.
Is it a solvent?
It's a solvent. It's an aqueous non-ionic dispersion consisting of ethylene vinyl acetate.
There you go.
And then it was mixed with a dilution of water.
Okay,
So
so
it was
kind
a-
of organic solvent to dissolve.
Yeah. So it was brushed with, the whole entire surface was brushed with this stuff. And then allowed the areas to dry. And then it was, each area was set down with a handheld heated spatula with a silicone release mylar sheet between the surface and the painting and the heat. But she used several different cleaning techniques used to remove the heavy fire damage, grime, and the varnish. And so she cleaned the surface. The varnish layer was removed with various solvents to achieve a good outcome. Some areas required the use of resin soap as a cleaning agent. She said this worked for more stubborn, discolored varnish lodged in the areas. And then several passes were made over the painting to try to remove as much as possible to expose the original colors to the painting.
Jennifer, I'm sorry, Do you think maybe the old varnish actually protected it somewhat? Could it been?
It's highly flammable, so I don't know,
Oh.
it's hard
Well,
to,
even after it was dry, I don't know.
maybe.
Where it
Because
was,
if they had to take that off, that was like a layer between. I
where,
don't know.
where it was hung,
Mhm.
it was received mostly smoke damage. The fire itself wasn't
Okay.
right there.
Oh,
So that
so
helped
that-
tremendously.
okay.
Yeah, but it was very heavily smoke damaged is what it was
Okay.
from.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the water that came in from the firemen. Okay, so, you know, a lot of times, the major damage occurs to artifacts from putting a fire out as to,
Because
just,
again, that wasn't where it got blasted with water, but because of the way the house is built, it maintained that dampness.
oh, yeah.
Yeah, so between the smoke and the
Sure.
dampness inside the building, it's just, I'm sure it's still similar.
Hopefully. So that process was done twice. And then the painting was removed from the stretcher and the tacking edge was relaxed flat with very little moisture. So as the moisture was applied, the edges were placed under blotting paper and waits until it was dry and flat. The reverse of the painting was cleaned with a document cleaning to dislodge the dust and grime in the fabric using a finger rolling motion and controlled hand held vacuum to remove the excess powder that it was releasing.
I don't know if any of you have ever seen like, conservation lab and with the document cleaner that she's talking about, they look like these little mini flour bags. And
Yeah.
they're filled with this stuff, and as you kind of just drop it and roll the bag around, it almost acts like an eraser in a way, to pull and extract loose dirt and dust and not something that's adhered like paint is, but just loose stuff off of the surface. It's really an interesting process.
Yeah.
But just about anybody can do it once you know the technique. It's a
Yeah.
real simple thing to do.
Then there was an adhesive that was applied to the back of the painting by brushing it, including the tacking edges. And then this was allowed to dry for 24 hours. And then the adhesive coating was infused into the painting using a heat vacuum table. And so this provides a full consolidation of the layers of the painting and base upon which the strip lining would better attach. And so that was done twice. So she had to wait a whole another 24 hours once it was dry and did the second application of the same process. And then the original stretcher was cleaned and removed and then sealed with a latex polyurethane varnish. And then new keys were added to the inner corners, which go here, which you can't see. Originally they were wood, but she used metal. Where is it? She used metal ones instead because the stretcher wasn't made to adequately have enough room for the two corners. So the keys are what you use to help stretch.
So it stayed on its original stretcher.
Yeah. So the wood ones were much better, and you'll see those in the next slides. So let's see. The varnish layer was applied and then hand rubbed to provide a soft semi-gloss layer. And then any losses that were occurred during the conservation, she filled in with modal stuck. I don't know what it is. And then the in-painting was done with acrylic resin. And then the surface was required spray painting to even out the surfaces. And then it took several coatings of that to even it out. And then the spray had a satin finish when they finished. And then it was actually, the original frame was in bad shape and it just wasn't feasible to put it. So we got a new frame that was kind of similar in style to what was there.
Can I interject a little something?
Yeah.
Background on that frame? That frame was made, at least the outside of the frame, was made with, like plaster molding,
Yeah.
and that molding was just breaking off in little
Gesso.
pieces, but it was really interesting to see the intricate work of
Yeah.
that.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, there, at that time period, a lot of them are all that. So this is what it is after treatment.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So you can see, because now, and you'll be able to see it, but you can actually see, the rope that connects the ferry across. This is the landfill. That's what I tell people. Because Bill was hoping it was, from Elkhart, but there's no mountains.
Yeah, ended up with some mountains.
So that's nice.
Lost trash.
Yeah,
Yes.
County Road 26 out there. The distance.
Are there seagulls heading back?
Yeah.
Big over,
And then, they did put a newer canvas on the back, lining, but then you've got your new keys on it. So much more, stable, than what it was.
And you will get to see, we'll show you the real thing in
Yeah,
just a
so
second.
that's it in its new frame, hanging in the family parlor. But it's a great tool for, especially when we do school groups, because we talk about the rope ferries when we walk outside, and, sometimes kids have no understanding of what a ferry, they think it's like actually a mythical ferry flying around, and I'm like, no, those, so it's a boat that we get across.
And did they wrote it, so the rope just, hooked through something and then they rode it across, or they actually pulled the rope?
Well, you could do it either way, but many times the person who was operating the ferry would pull the rope. That's their job, and then that they're providing the labor to get you across. You did get to situations where they had, mechanical motors that might do it as well. I think that by the time that the first bridge was erected across the St. Joe, I doubt that there were ever motors on this ferry. I think that it was a mechanical, man-powered ferry during its entire existence. And we believe, well, more than just believe, we have documentation that there were two. There was one across the St. Joseph and there was one across the Elkhart, because, the Elkhart coming up from the south cuts what is the town almost in half too. And so, tolls either way, and so.
Was this in the house when Bill got the house, or did he have?
So I started, I'll move around so you don't have to crane yourself and turn yourself around. One of the things that Bill said to me was that this painting was in the house when he got it from Frances Meisner, because Frances and her husband ran an antiques shop operation, and everything that was in the house when it was deeded to Bill in her will came to him as well. Some stuff he hung on to over the years, some stuff he parted with, but the things that he really liked he kept. But it was absolutely my understanding that this came with the house when it was willed to him. And so where she got it, now we don't know, but because they ran an antique store, there's more to this story, isn't there?
Yes, it is. So, another reason we wanted to actually conserve it was because there was a label on the back. And it says, from Professor Harry J. Kellogg's Art School, Elkhart, Indiana.
And the year.
Established, what is that, 1882? And so Monica saved that, so there's a little window on the back of the painting, so it's still visible. But we really didn't know much about this Kellogg. And so Randy at the
Midwest.
thank you, pulled up some things. And so in the newspapers, there were a number of little articles. So one, Mr. Harry Kellogg of South Bend designs giving two art entertainment in the city the latter part of this week, the proceeds of which will be used to found an Elkhart Art School. At these entertainments, Mr. Kellogg will not only talk art, but will also paint pictures in the presence of his audience. He has a reputation of being remarkably expert and prolific
In our aesthetic.
And our aesthetic, citizens will have an opportunity.
witness a marvel. And so this is from February 2nd of 1882. And his father was also an artist. And I had 1887, his father passed away in South Bend while he was on a trip to go do some portraits and stuff, unfortunately. But so here it says, this is from September of 1882, that he was going to give a free exposition of rapid drawing and painting in the Opera House here. Said he was acknowledged champion, first fast hand-off stretcher and painter of America. And so it was on the third floor of the Galt building?
Got
Which is at Main and Lexington. I didn't know where that was.
Is that the one that was torn down recently? That was the corner that they had that cleared next.
Oh, no, that's Main and Jackson, you mean where, Martin's was?
No,
No,
it was made in
next-
Lexington.
next- Yeah, where the building was,
It was,
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah,
On the northwest corner, where that building was taken down recently.
uh-huh.
But in another one from October of the same year, make arrangements for his art department as a portion of the school in the Woodard block. I don't know where that's at, if anybody. But he didn't just have them here. He kind of had pop-up shops. He had some like in South Bend. I think he would move around to wherever he thought he'd have clientele to do his projects. But our last little article about him though, see, Professor, so I think he was his own professor.
Professor.
Is when he were known as a rapid painter. If he would pay his bills with the same rapidity which is characterized as painting, numerous people would appreciate his talent better. So it's probably why he didn't have his own building. That's probably why he just jumped around, because he wasn't paying his bills.
In print. In print.
Obviously, the value is to the elder people.
Yeah. For the advertising for the school. That is pretty funny.
So I mean, there's not a whole lot known about him, other than these little clippings that they were able to pull
There's
out.
more known about his father from
Yeah.
a professional. If you go into like Art Review online and the bios and the history, there's just a tiny amount on Harry, but there's more about his father who, early to mid 19th century was a better known.
Yeah, his name is Daniel J. Kellogg.
Wonder if there are any relation to the Kellogg's that.
Well, he was an artist, said from Rochester, New York.
You mean you're thinking of Kellogg's in Battle Creek?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he said, because it said that he came to South Bend for the purpose of engaging in portrait painting and nearly completed arrangements for opening a studio on Washington Street, but he died while he was there.
Is that Kellogg spelled the same way?
I don't know.
Is
Are Kellogg's cornflakes spelled the
is
same?
that spelled the same way?
Or is there only one G?
Okay. Anyway, something about it looks wrong, I think.
Yeah.
So this painting was in his collection, it's not one that he did per
No.
se? This was
Well,
in the collection?
We don't know.
it has a school's label, but does not have a signature?
I don't think it has a, no, there's no signature.
Oh, okay.
So it could have been, you know, one of his students, or it could have been one of his, I don't know, but yeah, there's no signature other than just the label that's on the back.
Maybe his father did it.
It is more, where there's more mountains, I mean, and it came from Rochester, I don't know. He brought things with him.
We were happy to find the label, that's for certain, because, you know, we had no idea, nor do I believe that Bill or Jeff
I
would
don't
have.
know if Bill knew it or
Well,
not.
no, it was underneath the backing
Oh,
paper layer.
Oh.
That you didn't,
Yeah,
when you guys gave it to me that day, this label, well, wherever it is, several slides ago, was not visible, you couldn't see it.
Wow.
Monica discovered it during the restoration process. So shall we go take a look?
Yeah, sure.
Let's do it.